would you be so kind to introduce yourself with who are you?
My name's Eric Grennell. I'm the founder of the website WeHateLiberals.com. It's a blogging and satire site. We sell novelty T-shirts, and we post blogging and editorials.
And you were just saying you're aiming at what? What is your final goal? You know, the T-shirt selling T-shirts is not the.
Well, I'm a practicing attorney, okay, and I'm a very successful practicing attorney. I don't want to stop practicing law to sell T-shirts for a living, okay. Selling T-shirts is what I'm doing here for this event, okay. But the purpose of WeHateLiberals.com is to provide a website and social media interactions for, political correctness-free zone to talk about politics. There has been a very strong trend in the political discourse, especially in the past 10 years, to dictate to people what they can and can't talk about and how they must talk about it and how they must not talk about it. And it's not genuine. It's just an attempt to control the dialogue. And the purpose of the name of the website, WeHateLiberals.com, is to break through the walls of those artificial restrictions, because hate is just a word, okay? Hateful actions are what people should be concerned about, but criticizing the word hate in my domain name is much simpler than trying to debate the issues. And we just tend to ignore that and rise above it. We're here to speak to our audience, and that's the goal.
Just because it's so difficult. I mean, in Europe we understand the language somewhat, but the terminology is often not clear to me. So give me an example of that political correctness that you are opposed to.
I could give you an example just from what happened to me this weekend, okay? People would come up to our booth, right, and criticize us for using the word hate in our domain name and lecture us with moral approbation. And then they went home and they jumped on their social media, on their Facebook and their Twitter, and they called me a mouth breather, a redneck, a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, all of which are things that I'm not. But because they have a perception of me because of my political opinions, they feel justified in saying anything they want about me. So these people who went on social media and called me names, right, want to stand in front of my booth and lecture me because my domain name has the word hate in it. And it's a hypocrisy. It's a hypocrisy. A perfect example is what's going on with American politics right now with President Trump. They want to impeach Trump because of his interactions with the president of the Ukraine and some questions over whether or not he did quid pro quo. The irony is we have video of Joe Biden at the Council on Foreign Relations laughing and bragging about doing exactly what they want to impeach Trump for.
Although he wasn't president. I mean,
he was vice president. He was vice president, and in the video, he goes, "Oh yeah, President Obama's behind me 100%. Call him."
Okay, I haven't seen this. I don't want to comment on this.
Okay. Well, you should watch the video.
Right? No, I'm happy to watch it.
But it's that's the type of absurdity that political discourse has gotten to in America. We want to judge people today for doing the exact same thing that they did yesterday.
But was that not the same? I mean, for us from the outside, it's always going back and forth.
Yeah.
It's like when you view it from the outside. I'm a great fan of the US. I've been coming for 20 years, and I'm glad to be a guest here. So I'm very fond of the people, and I know people from all sides. But whoever is in, it's this side, and then it's the other side, and then it's jumping back and forth. Why do you think it is not possible to generally have a civilized discourse? Now, you provoked, and that with your name.
Yes.
But, I mean, you had to somehow imagine or expect that something would happen.
I don't mind people not liking my domain name. I don't mind people disagreeing with my political views. What bothered me yesterday was people wanting to lecture me for a half hour, standing in front of my booth, for using the word hate in my domain name, to then go home and call me names on their social media. They're hypocrites.
That's absolutely given.
Yeah.
There's no
question. That was the point. Yeah.
Let me ask you, because liberalism or liberal,
classical liberalism,
right?
Yeah.
See, that's such a strange thing. So if depending on what I studied and how I read that word, I would be offended or not offended. So what kind of liberals do you hate, respectively? Made the joke about hating.
Okay, well, it's funny you mentioned there has been this undercurrent of a movement towards democratic socialism in America that goes back to the 50s. Okay, and Europe, by and large, most of Western Europe moved to some version of democratic socialism. Even Britain is much more socialist than America. And
let me just be precise.
Yes.
Sorry. By that you mean that the government plays a relatively large role in the life of the citizens, in education, in healthcare, and so on and so forth. So a strong government role.
Yes. And that's the irony of it. There is already a very large government involvement in America. I think a lot of conservatives think we're fighting a war that we already lost. Because there is so much government, okay? But when I use the word liberal, I'm talking about Europe has a multi-party system, okay? And the country that I pay most attention to in Europe is Britain, and they have 12 parties with seats in parliament, maybe 13, okay? All right, America has 2, okay? And we call them Democrats and Republicans, okay? But, in the Democratic Party, you've got, you've got your Greens, you've got your all these different aspects of leftist politics, and they're different factions. But in America, they're all called Democrats, okay? And America has started to use the terms liberal and conservative versus Democrat and Republican very interchangeably. And it's sloppy and it's careless. They're very, very different, okay? However, when the name Democrat started to get a bad name in the 70s under Carter, which is what caused the rise of Reagan, they started calling themselves liberals, okay? Because liberals called back to classical liberalism, and it was an attempt to seize a moral high ground. Because if they're the classical liberalists, then we must be the reactionary right, which was an attempt to characterize the dialogue. Well, they have taken that word liberal and they've destroyed the brand, okay? The term liberal no longer fools anybody. It only serves them any value as a brand with people who are already in the left. The right hates it, okay? And the moderates don't fall for it, okay? So, and you've seen it in the past 5 years or so. They're not calling themselves liberal anymore. Now they're calling themselves progressives. Because who doesn't like progress, right? And, and we haven't used the term progressive in America in a century. The last time progressive was used in any meaningful way that had any substantive political impact was Teddy Roosevelt. But now, since they've destroyed the brand of liberal, they're now going to call themselves progressives. And you look at who's most loudly calling themselves progressives. You're looking at Elizabeth Warren. You're looking at Bernie Sanders. You're looking at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Okay? You're looking at Beto O'Rourke, who apparently wants to take my AR-15s. Okay, all right. They're now all calling themselves progressives because they want to distinguish themselves from liberal. And I'm very curious to know in 10 years what they're going to call themselves next when they've destroyed that brand. Because the way they are presenting what progressive means to America only appeals to their base. It will only win them votes in their primary. It will not serve them trying to impact the electorate in the general election. You know, people who identify as moderates or independents, you know, disproportionately vote Republican in federal elections. Okay?
Thank you. Now, given that, and we see that here, I mean, we're sitting here in Nashville, Tennessee at the Politicon conference. You said there's a lot of liberals here, especially amongst the press, in that understanding. Yeah. But from us, again, from the outside, it seems very divided. I mean, pretty much almost 50-50. It's hard to judge for us, but you know, who can you believe? Let's say 50-50. What would your ideal America look like? Because that's, I mean, I know we could talk about this now for years, but can you try to, so that we understand that worldview, what it means?
My answer will surprise you, okay? But first off, you talk about Nashville, you know, as someone who's traveled here for an event, who might not know the city very well, it's a very interesting place to hold this event because Nashville is a very blue city. And Tennessee is a very red state. Very red state. Senator Blackburn is over there giving autographs right now. And she's as red as they come. Okay? All right? And so Nashville can be a very interesting place. This event, you know, for the preceding 4 years has always been in LA. And I think the tenor and the flavor of this event will change the longer it stays outside of California, okay? And that's not these people's fault. It's just a matter of there's a lot of conservatives who aren't going to go to California for anything and never will. So I think
why? Sorry, because of the earthquakes? Are they afraid of earthquakes, or I don't?
No, because California is so overwhelmingly liberal, and it permeates not just the politics, but it permeates everything. I've traveled to California recently, and I was in a Starbucks, and I had to listen to someone scold me for 5 minutes because I mistakenly put my water bottle in the wrong hole in the trash can, so it ended up in the wrong recycling bag. Okay. As someone from Kentucky, okay, I'm all for the environment too, right? But our trash cans in Kentucky don't have 5 holes in them. Okay.
It's a nice example. Thank you. Thank you. That's I would have never loved the example.
And it wasn't the fact that there was this thing that I wasn't familiar with. It was the fact that someone saw fit to lecture me about it for 5 minutes. You know.
Okay, that's a very good example. So let's just, because that's really important for people back home to try to understand. What is the conservative America like? Because at the moment, with the political situation that we have, it's somewhat moving in that direction, or trying to be moved in that direction. If that continues, then the next 4 years, if the president gets the chance, it will move further in that direction. What is that direction?
It's interesting you say that, because as someone who's been in politics my entire life, as someone who worked on Mr. Trump's campaign in 2015, 2016, okay, I truly don't think that Mr. Trump is driving the political narrative in America. He gets all the media coverage, right? He gets all the media attention, but whatever is happening here today in American politics was going to happen anyway. If, you know, we have heard nonstop since the election was over about Russia and collusion and everything else. And by and large, it came up to not a lot of detail. Okay? If Ted Cruz had won the primary, the Democrats wouldn't suddenly be happy and content that Republicans are in power. We'd have the exact same animosity. We'd have the exact same acrimony. They would have just found some different issue to pick on. Ted Cruz's campaign was staffed by people who have much more experience in the whole partisan circle. And they wouldn't have gotten entrapped the way Papadopoulos did, okay? And it would have had to do something different. My personal belief, if Ted Cruz had won the election, we would be hearing nonstop, through the entire presidency that the American White House was being run by Goldman Sachs because of Ted Cruz's wife's connection to Goldman Sachs.
So there's always something.
It would have been something else. Yeah. You know, it would have been something else. It is the acceptable strategy of political conflict today, I think both in America and in most of the Western world, to personally attack your opponent. Look at what the media has done to Boris Johnson. Okay? I think Boris Johnson could have prevented some of that. I mean, the man's well off. I wish he'd buy a comb, you know?
Sorry.
They have it is just like that. Okay? We attack our opponents personally. Okay? I expect, if I have any level of success, I expect to be personally attacked. It's what we now do. And the reason that Trump is so compelling in that regard is because he's a New Yorker. All right? You call Donald Trump a name, he doesn't care. You know, you attack him, he attacks you back. It's the New York way. It's always been the New York way. And
so Kentuckians are more polite? I mean, there's a serious... There's something that disturbs me as an individual deeply, which is that it has come, and I mean, there's no doubt you're a very intelligent human being. I meet a lot of intelligent human beings from all sides of the aisle. Yes. But we've come just to accept that this kind of really behavior that my grandmother and also my mother would not have tolerated from me is suddenly becoming the norm. So is that not an upsetting...
It's been happening for 50 years.
What does that mean? We're not. Are we aiming at changing it, or just where does it lead? Is there no radicalization based on the language? I mean, this is.
Are you familiar with Saul Alinsky?
Which one?
Saul Alinsky?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Saul Alinsky wrote a short book. He was a community organizer. He was very much on the left. Okay. And he wrote something called The Rules for Radicals. And the Democratic Party started to change in the early 70s after McGovern lost the Democratic primary for president and then Nixon won in a landslide. The Democratic Party then surrendered to George McGovern. And George McGovern turned the Democratic Party from the party of labor, okay, and turned it into a coalition of all those different leftist interest groups, okay? And it was a disaster for a while. That's why Reagan won in 1980, because well, not all, but a sizable portion of organized labor voters who were conservative on social issues switched to the Republican Party in 1980. And when the Democratic Party lost that block of voters, right, that is when the Democratic Party became truly radical left. And the difference between a Democrat and a liberal or a Democrat and a socialist ceased to exist. Okay? Saul Alinsky wrote this 12 Rules for Radicals. And I advise you to look it up. It's very popular. It's very frequently cited. It's very common knowledge. I'm not referring to some obscure man, okay?
And he's of the opinion that this language is positive for social development.
Let me read his rules to you.
Yeah.
Okay? Let me read the rules to you.
Thank you. That's good. I'm really interested. You know it? Have you heard it? No. Yeah.
Rules for Radicals, Saul Alinsky. Okay? Let's see. No. That's a Wikipedia article about the book. Let me find.
Oh, you can paraphrase it. I believe you know it.
I want to get it. I want to get it right because it's very important.
No, you wouldn't like to get it left. That would be. Sorry, that's just.
Well, if I happen to word it wrong, liberals will go on social media and talk about how stupid and uneducated I am.
I wouldn't. I'm not. But I'm not. Then I'm not really left. So.
No, I Let me read these to you.
Yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
Rule number 1. Power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. Power is derived from two main sources, money and people. Have-nots must build power from flesh and blood. Never go outside the expertise of your people. It results in confusion, fear, and retreat. Feeling secure adds to the backbone of anyone. Whenever possible, go outside the expertise of the enemy. And that one, I think, is one that you see. This has become very popular, okay? Bloggers love to do this, okay? And conservatives do it probably just as well as liberals do. You go on some college campus, right? You interview 400 people and ask them what they think about this question, right? And then 390 people know what they're talking about, give good answers, and you completely eliminate them. And then what you see on the video are the 10 dumbest people that got interviewed. And then they say, look how stupid these people are. All right? It's not very kind or polite.
But this is an excellent point. Thank you, by the way, for this, because this is very interesting.
So, let's see. All right. Now here's where I talk about. Let me highlight the rules that affect what you're asking about. Okay. Rule number 5. Ridicule is man's most potent weapon. There is no defense. It's irrational. It's infuriating. It also works as a key pressure point to force the enemy into concessions. Okay? When you talk about debate, you talk about rhetoric. Okay? Rhetoric has terms of art. And everyone knows the term ad hominem. Okay? Ad hominem means to the man. Okay? So don't attack my ideas. Attack me as a person. Don't attack the message. Kill the messenger. If you can discredit the messenger, no one even has to worry about debating his message. Okay? That is exactly that's the heart and soul of political discourse today. That's all we do is attack each other.
But is that good? I mean, well, yeah. Is that, you see, as human beings, we're in the same generation. It's effective to a point.
It's very effective.
Yeah.
And where we're at in America, I can't say about Europe, okay? But where we're at in America, people go around doing exactly that. Attacking the man, attacking the man, attacking the man. And then they turn around and attack their enemy and say, why don't you talk about the issues? No one talks about the issues.
Where's that going to go? I mean, where does that lead to? Because we talk about words, and we both know words are very powerful. Otherwise, you using them, I'm using them. But what is the formulation of that?
Until we have a more educated, more informed, more sophisticated electorate, that dynamic is not going to change. An unintelligent, uninformed person's vote is just as important as an informed, intelligent person's vote.
What do you always say?
and of course, both sides see that's a good question. would there not be, that's an interesting question. So a reform of the electoral system itself, fundamentally, that imposes certain rules and certain hurdles, maybe, to come to the right to vote, to the honor to vote, may that be helpful? I don't know.
I know this. You walk the streets in America, everyone in America is talking about politics all the time.
But only few people vote.
They only think, what? We're approaching 70% voter turnout for presidential elections. Yeah, 70. Yeah.
I know 50.
I might have quoted a bad statistic. Okay, but it's trending upwards.
It's trending upwards.
Okay, all right. Okay. Trump got a lot of people to come out and vote that weren't previously voters. So, and the Democrats turned around in 2018 and had very high voter turnout. So voter turnout is trending up. Okay. But Americans want to talk about politics so much all the time. We should be parliamentary. We should be parliamentary. We're talking about politics all the time anyway, right? So what's the difference? You know, and it'll never happen. It'll never happen. But America is so obsessed with continual media coverage of politics and what's going on in politics. And there's such a large portion of our population who is so constantly engaged in political debate and political back and forth, especially on social media. Culturally, I think that we'd be very ready for a parliamentary style of government.
This is great. Thank you. I wouldn't know what to say. Thank you very much. I thought, this is right.
But it's, it is what it is. It is what it is. But, yeah, in answer to your question, attacking the person is so much easier than talking about complicated policy issues. And it's also much easier to put on the air and sell advertising space around. And the media, Trump would probably not have won the Republican primary if the media hadn't given him all that free coverage, billions of dollars worth of free coverage, okay? Because, you're asking, at the beginning of this conversation, you asked me whether or not my website was making anything about the political discourse better. Who cares? Who cares? As long as our media operates the way it does, it's never going to get any better. Because they're not here to make government better. They're not here to make our system fairer. They're here to divide us and create conflict, because conflict creates interest. Interest creates viewers. Viewers creates rating numbers, and rating numbers determine how much they charge for their advertising. And as long as that's what the media cares about, the only thing that's going to stop that may be the internet. Because the media has less and less of an impact on people's political opinion in America every day, because we all get our information from alternative sources.
That's why we do what we're doing.
And if you come to America a lot, what's really fascinating, pay attention. The TV that you watch in Washington, D.C. is completely different from the news you watch anywhere else in this country. Because they're in the business of governance. So they have to appeal to a different market. Everyone else is trying to cater to the lowest common denominator.